Indonesian President Joko Widodo has declared a national public health emergency amid warnings the nation could face more than 140,000 deaths within a month from COVID-19. Indonesia correspondent Anne Barker joins me now from Melbourne. Anne, where has this warning come from?
Kirsten, this is a report from a group of researchers, medical researchers mainly, including from the University of Indonesia, and it was prepared for Indonesia's planning agency, Bappenas. It covers a range of scenarios that could come into play, depending on how much intervention there is by the government in Indonesia to try and stop the spread of coronavirus. In the worst case scenario, they're actually warning there could be 240,000 deaths within about a month by the end of April or early May. But they do suggest that even the low level of intervention that has taken place already in Indonesia is probably enough to avert that, in which case the highest level of deaths they're predicting in the current scenario is possibly 144,000 again by the end of April, if only light intervention is in play. They're suggesting that if much tougher measures come in over the next few weeks, or immediately really, there could be as low as 12,000 deaths. But either way, it's vastly more than the 136 deaths in Indonesia that are recorded now. More than half of them are in Jakarta. So it really comes down to what the government is prepared to do, whether they're prepared to introduce much tougher measures than we're seeing right now in Indonesia.
Well, what has been the government's response so far to the outbreak?
Well, as you said, there has been a public health emergency declared. That's similar to what the governor of Jakarta declared just a week ago. President Joko Widodo has flagged restrictions on movement of people, but he hasn't really spelt out what those restrictions might be. Now, he's left it for individual cities and provinces around the country to implement their own lockdowns. He's been reluctant to impose any sort of lockdown on the capital, Jakarta, or the country as a whole because of the impact that would have on the economy. There are 30 million people who live in Greater Jakarta. So many of those people don't work in the formal economy. They're people who effectively don't have bosses. They might be motorcycle taxi drivers, they might be cleaners, they might be food sellers, street hawkers, and so on. Now, they cannot afford not to work, a lot of them. They live a hand-to-mouth life, and if they don't work, they don't eat. So at the moment, there's been a voluntary sort of system imposed on people to stay at home, to work at home if they can, to pray at home. There's been a real reluctance to actually ban people movements across the country. But
even so, and there has been a surge in the amount of people leaving Jakarta.
There has been. I mean, this just happens to be the month now, April, where Ramadan, the fasting month, will begin later in April. And at the end of that, there's always the Eid al-Fitr holiday. Last year, 20 million people left Jakarta for their home villages across Java and other parts of the country. We're already seeing a massive exodus of people from Jakarta, partly because they are already forced to stay at home anyway, a lot of them, and also because there is this fear of catching coronavirus if they stay. So there's already been thousands of people leaving Jakarta for other provinces. There has been talk or calls for the president to ban this so-called homecoming. But again, as I say, the president has been reluctant to do that. And unless those measures are taken, then we could see a death toll in line with one of those higher scenarios, those worst-case scenarios in the report that I mentioned earlier.
Anne Barker, thank you.